Hey, how y'all doing? This is Hunt 919 Truth or Sports coming to you with another segment. Go ahead and get right into it. This is a segment that I called or titled What I Learned About Coach Prime's coaching staff and the loss to Kansas State. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I will point out again, even with this team not really playing well, they can still beat you. It kind of reminds me of a snake or a rattlesnake with its head cut off. Even though the head is cut off, it can still poison you, can still get you sick, it can still take you out. So they kind of like that. They can be down by a touchdown or a touchdown in the field goal. They can be down by two touchdowns, and then by the fourth quarter, you find yourself behind them. So you have to give them credit with their resiliency, as they always have. The defense got off to a good start with the four and out in the first possession. I wanted to point that out because sometimes they get up to a slow start, so I think that's pretty good. With the start of the game. To note, the team did suffer some major injuries. I think. One of the receivers is out for the season. I don't want to quote it because I don't know for 100%. I think it's Omarion Miller. That was pretty. It was the same type of tackle that they outlawed in the pros. It's that hip tackle, but he didn't really do a hip tackle. But the way he came down, it had the same type of effect. It traps your leg and your feet under you. You really can't move, and if they get caught in the wrong position, you can easily break something. And that's basically what happened to him. Um, in the same breath, the offense still looked dangerous, which is a testament to Shador and his talents. Like I said before in the first sentence, they're like a snake with their head cut off. Even though their head is cut off, it can still poison you, can still kill you. And Shador he's just that good. You can't take nothing from the kid. As far as coaching presence, I always say this, and I'm gonna keep saying that Coach Prime to me still doesn't really have a coaching presence on the sidelines. He's more of a motivational, speaker and you do your job and all that. Really no X's and O's, and you don't really see much from him when it comes to that. That is what it is. So let me get into the offense, which is led by Pat Shermer, who's the offensive coordinator. Excuse me, the offensive line coach, Coach Phil Loadholt. The offense went back to being one dimensional, was just strictly passing the ball. I don't think it's not that they can't run. I truly don't think they want to run. I think with Shador being back there, with Coach Prom, not only has it been his son, which has a lot to do with it, but he wants quick scores, and to do that, he just wants to pass. So it's the only team in the nation that has an excuse for not running is Colorado, and so they went back to being one dimensional. Shador was sacked 6 times, but two of those sacks was from the offensive line. The rest of those sacks was because of him. From watching the game and from seeing other reports, they actually said the same thing as me. Two of those sacks are on the offensive line, the rest are on him. Um, One time, one of the running backs did miss a block on one of the blitz. But Shador, as we all know, I don't want to sound repetitive, but he just will not throw the ball away. He just won't do it. He's a senior now. What is it, junior or senior, and he still won't do it. So you just have to coach that out of him. One of the running backs, Augustus, did score a touchdown, but he only had 11 yards. Like I said, they went back to being one dimensional. The offense did not look, really look creative like they did last game. None of the running backs was kept active at all. Normally they have a running back by committee. At this particular time, nobody really got a chance to run the ball. So that took away from the creativity, and again, it made them one dimensional. By halftime, the offense had produced 7 points. Now, for the game, Shador went 34 for 40 with 388 yards and three touchdowns and one interception. The negative 29 rush yards comes from or what is it? They had a negative 29 rush yards, but it was a negative 50 by Shador alone. And if you what I had to do some research on this. When you get sacked behind the line of scrimmage, they count that as negative rushing yards now. In the pros, it's negative passing yards. So they kind of put that on the running backs group. So that's where a lot of the negative rushing came from. So it's kind of so when he's going backwards, it's killing them. And like I said, it counts against the rush yards. Hayden did lead them with 11 rush yards, which is terrible. I don't think and you can mark my words now, some of those guys will not come back. I would not be a running back and play at Colorado. I just wouldn't. Too many excuses not to run the ball, and you don't want to be on a team like that if you're a running back. So I get the offensive line a B minus because they still held up pretty well. And like I said, they only gave up two legit sacks. The running backs, which is coached by Coach Flea, the running backs went 10 carries for 21 yards amongst Hayden and Augusta. The leading rusher was Hayden. He went 7 carries for 11 yards and zero touchdowns. Augusta was the only one that got a rushing touchdown. So as usual, they had no presence on the game. They had no impact on the game. And I always say most of the team, because I look at the other stats around, different teams, some of the top teams, most of them run the ball around 30 times or close to 30 rushes per game. That's just not what the running backs do. Coach Flea, I don't know how much he really, is fighting for his team behind. Because I did a segment asking him to fight for those running backs. Why do you have running backs that come into your school and you recruit them and this and that, and you just don't use them? I mean, it's just rare in football. So I give the running backs an F for their production. It's not really their fault, but it is what it is. And again, the question is going to be how many of them is going to transfer when the season's up. Because I wouldn't go there from a running back. The wide receivers will go to the wide receiving group, which is led by Jason Phillips. The receivers look great, very productive as always. They're a one-dimensional team, so if you're a wide receiver, that's where you want to be. This is where you want to play. They lost Jimmy to an ankle injury, Travis to a shoulder injury, Omarion Miller to a foot, leg, or ankle. I'm still not really sure on what it is. I think it's his knee, but I'm not sure. They did say he left in a wheelchair after the game, and they had his lower part of his leg was like in a cast or something similar to a cast. And I always say it was one of those hip injuries that they outlawed. And if you go back and look at the replays, it's just like a hip, one of those hip tackles where you just kind of grab them at the hips and put all your body weight below their legs, and it just tears their legs up. It happened in Dallas a couple of years ago when they played San Francisco. Um, what else? Will Shepard had 8 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. He's very consistent. LeJontay Wester had 5 catches for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is almost the same numbers that he had last week. He's very consistent. Shador did hit 9 different receivers. I think last week he hit 10. Normally he hits between 9 to 10 receivers, which is very good. Now with all these injuries, I think they did announce that Travis will be coming back. I don't know which side of the ball he'll play on with this hurt shoulder, but they still have two very good receivers left for one game. If you got two good receivers, you're still doing good. And so I don't really worry about them. They got, with LeJontay and Will Shepard, they're still in, very good hands with that. So I really don't worry about them when it comes to that. Um, so they should be good for the Arizona game. Now the receiving corps did outperform the Kansas State receivers. Colorado had 34 catches for 388 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kansas State had 17 catches for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they did very well. The receiving room looked great. They looked explosive. I gave them an A. But even after the injuries, late in the game, they still had an opportunity to win. So what can you say about that? I mean, it's just an A group. They have very good quarterback, and you have very good receivers, and you're going to grade high as far as I'm concerned. The defense, which is led, by Coach Vincent, Coach Lewis, Coach Livingston, Coach Hart, and Coach Mathis. The defense could not stop the run at all. I think that was well documented. Coach Sanders kept talking about it was over 200 yards in rushing. I think like 242. But when I looked up the stats, they gave up 185 yards, and 182 of those yards was by DJ Giddens. And I think the discrepancy in the yards is because the quarterback has some negative yards, and that takes away from the rushing yards. So 185 rushing with 182 by DJ Giddens. So it was they just couldn't stop the run. Craig had a good game. He did have a sack. Craig is one of my favorite players to watch. Been watching him for a while since Jackson State. B.J. Green with a fumble recovery last week. Then he had 2 sacks this week, so he's picking up on that defensive side of the ball. McCoy had a sack. Colton Hood got a pick to put them up late in the game, and I really thought they was going to win the game at that point. The defense did record 4 sacks in all. The defense normally doesn't give up a lot of points in the second half of the games, but this time they gave up 17 second half points and 31 for the game. But for the most part, that defense holds up. Sometimes, they're gonna get the better of you sometimes. And if they could have stopped the run or the pass at the end of the game, they would have won the game. Now, would it have made a difference if Travis was in there? I mean, I don't know. So again, they had 185 yards rushing yards, 182 from one guy. They ended up with 238 yards passing with 4 touchdowns, 2 passing and 2 rushing touchdowns. As far as what was done against them, so I give them a C- minutes this time on the defense. For the special teams, the kicking game that went well. They did show some creativity. I noticed they put two guys in the backfield. I think it was on the punt. They put Horn and Wester back there, I believe, and I appreciated that because if you watch Colorado, they really don't get a lot of return yards in either the kicking game or the punting game. So that shows some creativity, because I look for stuff like that. So I give them B overall. I did have four players of the game. Shador, he has the ability to keep his team in the game. He always gives his team a chance to win, which is what you want in a quarterback. Mario Miller, he was 8 for 145 yards before he got hurt, and he does it with so much ease. He's does I hate to say consistently because he doesn't consistently play, but when he's in there, he puts up something special, some type of consistent numbers, a touchdown. He does something. And I hate to think that he may be out for the season, but he went 8 for 145 yards. And he was also one of the players of the week last week for what he did last week. So I have him as one of the players of the game. B.J. Green with the fumble recovery last week, and then he had two sacks this week. Were against Kansas State. He's one of my players of the game. And then the offensive unit as a whole, they did lose their two top receivers, but they still stepped up and they gave themselves a chance to win at the end of the game. Because I don't know how many you rarely see an offensive unit in one game lose that many players. So I give them credit for that. It was a hard fought loss, but they're still in good shape. I did have them at 4-2 at this point in the season anyway, so I may have got some of the wins and losses mixed up, but I had the record at 4-2 at this point anyway. So they're still in good shape. They're going to Arizona this upcoming weekend, and that they just as even with Arizona, they can easily win that game or they can easily lose that game. And I'll do a segment on that. So I give I graded each coaching staff. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's been Hunt 919, Truth to Sports. Ride with me.